1 Samuel. Now in Sunday school we've been dealing with the fact of being gracious the past, 3 lessons I think we've went over just being gracious. And so tonight we're going to kind of stay a little bit along those lines, and we're going to do it in 1 Samuel chapter number 1, and we'll do it in the first 11 verses, which is going to seem kind of odd. But tonight the title of the message is Thanks. And so I don't know about y'all, but you ever do a really nice gesture for somebody and they don't say thanks? You know, sometimes you might just do something just really out of the way, and then you expect at least a thank you or something, and then sometimes you get nothing. And, if it's one of your kids, you're more like that little ungrateful brat. And so sometimes I feel like as Christians, we take on that attitude and can do the same thing. And so let's read the first 11 verses, and then we'll kind of delve into the message tonight. And so it says, "Now there was a certain man of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. And he had 2 wives, and the name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priest of the Lord, were there. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave unto Peninnah his wife, and all her sons and daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her, and therefore she wept and did not eat. Then said Elkanah, her husband, unto her, Hannah, why weepest thou, and why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am I not better to thee than 10 sons? And so Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk, and now Eli the priest sat upon the seat by the post of the temple of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thy handmaid, remember me, and not forget thy handmaid, but wilt thou give unto thy handmaid a man-child, then shall I give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head." And so the interesting thing about this story is, as we read 1 Samuel, more than likely on a Wednesday night, most everybody's probably familiar with who Hannah is, probably familiar with who Samuel is, and so man, this is a great story, and everything turns out great. But can I say that when Hannah was praying in verse number 11, she didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And just like many of us tonight, you may be facing something and you don't know what the outcome of it is going to be. And I will start off by saying I'm not making light of anybody's problems, because your problems can be much worse than any I've ever faced. I don't downplay that at all. Everybody faces their own situation, and to say that you know what somebody's going through, to me, is just a foolish statement, because everybody's situation is different. There's different elements, and there's different personalities and different involvement that goes on. So to say that you know what somebody's going through, to me, is just super arrogant to even say, no matter if you may have been through something similar. And but here, you've got a couple of main characters in these verses here. You've got Elkanah, which is a man of God, somebody that worships the Lord, somebody that's very interested in God. He goes every year, he makes the sacrifices, and he gives out portions and all that kind of stuff. So it seems that he's a man of a good spirit. And then he has a wife, Hannah, and Hannah seems to be a good woman. And so then you've got the adversary. And so there's always an adversary, isn't there? No matter where you're at, there's always an adversary. And so it says that yearly they would come down, and it seems that every year that this adversary would provoke her and to make her bitter. And can I say that it's very easy, if we're not careful, to let an adversary rob us of our joy inside of us, even when we've got so many other things that God's been doing for us already. And it was lack of preparation on my part, I guess, but if I would have gotten it taken care of in time tonight, I was actually going to bring a cardboard cutout bigger than me and use the illustration of putting that thing, when you put something in front of you that's bigger than you know what you can't see? You can't see anything else. And that's what we do with our problems a lot of times is we put that thing right in front of us and we make it so big that we can't see anything else. Our wife might be sitting right next to us, but when we look over, we can't see her because all we can see is it. And so if we're not careful, we just have a very hard time being thankful to God for all the other things that He's done for us. And so here with Hannah, we find where she had been blessed in many ways. And so if I was going to ask you tonight, when was Hannah blessed? Most people would say after Samuel was born, is what most people would say. And you would be right. She was blessed after Samuel was born. But can I say that Hannah was a very blessed lady before Samuel was even came about? Ladies, wouldn't you say that having a godly husband would be a big blessing? If you've ever not had one, I'm sure you would definitely say that, yeah, man, that's great. And so here, Hannah, she already had a godly husband. And then in verse number 5, we find that not only does she have a godly husband, but, man, she can give thanks for the portion that she's been given. Because, look, he didn't just give her some to go make a sacrifice with. It says it right here in verse number 5, but unto Hannah he gave a what portion? So Hannah was given a worthy portion. And so Elkanah, he's giving out portions as they go to make sacrifice. And I don't know about you tonight, but can I say that I am thankful that God has given me more than just what I've got to give back to Him. And I'm almost certain everybody in this room can say that we've all been given more than what we've got to give back to Him. And just as Hannah was given a worthy portion, man, I have to say that I am very unworthy of the portion I've been given. Man, God's been so good to me in my life, and not to say that I've never had any problems. Man, He's done so many things that I just didn't deserve. And to me, Elkanah, he's almost like a picture of God because he just gives Hannah so much. Why? Just because he loves her. And so she has much to be thankful for. She can be very thankful for the portion that she's been given. She's been able to go and give something back to God that she didn't have before she got there. And she had that because Elkanah was kind enough to give her a worthy portion. And I've heard people illustrate that worthy portion and define it some things. And I'm on the fence on what some of that stuff can really mean. But regardless of the fact, Hannah had more of a portion than what she actually needed. And I don't know about you, but I'm glad that God is willing to give me way more of a portion than what I actually deserve. And so the next thing I want you to look at in verse number 8 is Hannah can be thankful for the provision that's been given to her. Now, here they are, they've gone, and in verse number 8 it tells us, it says that Elkanah, her husband, then said Elkanah, her husband, to her, Hannah, why weepest thou, and why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Now, here's the thing is, this is probably like the best meal of the year. I mean, it's an exciting thing. They've went up to worship the Lord and to make sacrifices. This is probably the best meal. I mean, if it was for me, it would be like going down to the steakhouse down here and getting a big, huge ribeye. And so here she is. She's so grieved about what the adversary has provoked her about, and now she's gotten distracted that she can't enjoy what's in front of her. And if we're not careful, it's very easy for us to lose sight of the provision that God's given us because something has provoked us. And I can't help but to feel that God probably gets frustrated when He keeps shelling out provision and we're looking right past it. I mean, you think about the children of Israel, God fed them with manna every day. And you know what they started doing? They started complaining about having to eat manna every day. Well, there's an easy way of fixing that. He could have just not fed you anything. But see, God continued to give them provision, and then they started complaining about the provision. And so here Hannah is, God's been very kind to her, and I don't want you to think that I'm beating up on Hannah tonight. I'm just saying that God had already been blessing Hannah in her life before Samuel came along. And so here Hannah, she's given a good a good provision. She's being well taken care of. And can I say that unthankfulness is the attitude of the world, and it shouldn't be the attitude of church or of Christians. That shouldn't be our attitude. And so God has given her a great provision, and she's got a godly husband, and she's being very well taken care of here, and she's even given a worthy portion just to offer back to God. And so those are some great things that she's being given there. But the adversary has gotten her distracted. And it's gotten her so distracted that her problem, what she's upset about, is because she don't have a relationship, she don't have children, right? I mean, that's what she's really, really struggling about, is because she's been provoked that her adversary here has these children and she don't. And so she's upset and grieved about the fact that she don't have that fellowship or that communion with her own children. She's probably watching Paniah with her kids, and Paniah, she'd probably say passive-aggressive stuff constantly, not that women would ever do that, but I'm just assuming that maybe she would do that. And so anyway, she's seeing all these, seeing them, correspond with each other, and there's probably the little snide comments that would be made. And so it really gets down in her soul and really bothers her. And you know what? She don't even realize that it's messing up the one relationship that she does have. The one guy that really does care about her, the one guy that's really been shelling out the provision, the guy that's been giving her a worthy portion and all that kind of stuff. And verse number 8 at the end of it, this is what he says, and I'm sure any lady that's ever been barren would probably say this was a completely foolish statement for him to make it. But he makes the statement. He says, "Am not I better to thee than 10 sons?" Now, I'm sure that any lady that's never been able to have children would say, "Man, that's such a stupid statement." But I really believe that he made that statement in light of the fact saying, "Hey, I'm being all I can be for you." And in all honesty, I mean, think about it. If he didn't really care about her, why is he even having a conversation with her right now? I mean, just being honest. I mean, there's a feast, there's a lot going on. If he wanted to enjoy himself, he could have just ignored her and carried on. But obviously, he had enough passion about her that he was interested in trying to help her spirit. And so Elkanah, he's got this great passion for his wife, and he wants to see her do well. And can I say that God has a great passion for us, wanting us to have joy and wanting us to be happy. And so don't snub your nose when God does something for you to try to brighten your day. But see, a lot of times we get so distracted on the adversary or on what's eating at us that we don't even see it when God does something special for us. I don't know about y'all, but man, it completely baffles me when God does like the little bitty things. When He takes notice of just like the little bitty things in your life, it completely brings front and center the fact of how much He really cares about you. And I don't know how many times I've seen Him just do the little things, like maybe even things that I didn't even necessarily pray about, but just kind of thought about. And the Lord do it for me, and you think, man, that's so amazing. But you know what? We don't see those things when we get focused on our adversary. And we don't see the passion that God's poured into our life when we get so focused on the adversary. Because that's all we can see is just the adversary. And we don't see God anymore. We don't see the provisions that He's given us anymore. We don't see the portions that He's shelling out to us. We don't see the family and all the other things that God's done for us. Why? Because that one thing is the only thing that we can see anymore. And that one thing will destroy our spirit, and all it's going to do to us is just make us miserable. And I remember Jennifer's grandmother. She was a very private kind of lady. She didn't really like, if there was more than about 5 people around, she ain't even going to say a word. You won't even know. She's ready to avoid any kind of crowd or anything like that. But she had a hard life. I mean, she did. She had a very hard life. And she faced all kinds of complications and problems just getting through life. And so I guess she was probably born in like somewhere around 1920, 1918, somewhere in there. And so she grew up pretty hard, had a pretty rough life. And then she had, I believe it was, she had 5 kids. So she had 5 kids, and she ends up burying 2 of her sons. her only 2 sons, she buried both of them. Buried one of them when he was 16. And then buried the other one when he was probably about 45 or so. And so when Jennifer was pregnant with Mariana, they put her on bed rest. And so this lady that I never really heard talk or, ever really got to know before, one day we're at home and somebody knocks on the door. I open the door and she's standing at the door. And so she says, "Hey, I come to stay the week." And I was like, "Well, great." And so she starts in and she said, "Hey, my bags are in the car if you want to go grab them." And I was like, "Sure." And so I go out to the car, grab her bags, and bring them in. And over that week, you know what I learned? I learned that through adversity, she still kept her joy. Every night when I would come in from work, Jennifer would lay there in the bed just, doing nothing. And she'd be laying there in the bed. And so we had 2 chairs in the bedroom, and so her grandmother would sit in one and I would sit in the other one, and she would basically tell us about stuff that happened in her life. And man, it was crazy because I didn't really know the lady, but all week long I super enjoyed sitting there and hearing about all the things that played out in her life. Now, a lot of that stuff was bad, but man, a lot of it, she put a funny spin on it. And you know what? She didn't allow those things to take her joy. She was still thankful to God for who God was in spite of the adversity that she faced. In spite of the husband that was always just, he was always there, but he was just a little bit of a pain in the neck, And just in spite of losing 2 sons, both of them in car wrecks. And so in spite of all these things, she had so many things that she could have been bitter about, but man, she would laugh and carry on the whole evening as we would sit there and talk. And can I say that she could have very well taken all those same things that had happened in her life, and she could have sat there every night and she could have griped and complained about losing her one son at 16 and losing the other son when he was in his 40s, and she could have talked about how sorry her husband was, and she could have and would have been right in saying all those things. She would have had a valid argument for saying all those things. But you know what she chose? She chose to be delightful. And she chose to spread that cheer. And in all honesty, it wasn't the best week for us. Jennifer being on bed rest all week and me just doing whatever, And so we wasn't really looking forward to that week ahead of time. But can I say that when it was over, man, we didn't really regret it after the fact. Because she brought something in our home that we needed at that time. And I can say that I'm super thankful for what she did that week. And if she wouldn't have been so delightful, our week probably wouldn't have been near as good either. And so by her not allowing her circumstances to keep her all worked up and to keep her angry and bitter, and I'm sure we all know somebody that's in their 80s that's bitter, right? I mean, we've all met them at the grocery store or whatever. You just see them and you just know, I better not talk to that person. And so I'm thankful that she was not that way. And she didn't let those circumstances that had came into her life cause her to be that way. And so if you will, turn over to Romans chapter number 1. Romans chapter number 1. Now, I will tell you that in 1 Samuel 2:21, it tells us that Hannah, after she had Samuel, she had him, and then she went on to have 3 sons and 2 daughters. Now, she gave Samuel back to God, but that's not really the emphasis tonight. But God did end up giving her 6 children when it was all said and done. And so she was not blessed at that time. She was just more blessed. And so, but in Romans chapter number 1 and verse number 21, I want to point out something to you tonight. And I know we just had Thanksgiving not long ago, and so thankfulness and all that kind of stuff had been talked about. But as I was reading through 1 Samuel not long ago, I just couldn't get away from the whole thought of how blessed Hannah already was and how good God had already been to her, even though she was still missing that one thing in her life. And can I say that even though there might be one major thing that you're still missing in life, and there might be something that's really grieving you, don't lose sight of all the other things God's already done for you. And so in Romans 1:21 it tells us, it says, because when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, and neither were they what? Neither were they thankful. And so can I say that being unthankful is an attribute of the world or the unbeliever. And so as Christians, we don't want to be unthankful for what God has done for us. In 2 Timothy chapter number 3 and verse number 1, it says, "This know also that in the last day peerless times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, and then unthankful." Now look, it says, this is just crazy to me, the order. You've got covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers. And in that same mix, it throws in being unthankful. And so I just want to encourage you, don't be unthankful for all the things that God has already done for you. In 1 Thessalonians chapter number 5 and verse number 18, it says, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you." Now, here's the real kicker is in verse number 19, it says, "Quench not the spirit." So verse 18, it says, hey, don't be unthankful. Make sure you give thanks. And then in verse number 19, it says, quench not the spirit. And so can I say that if we're unthankful and we've got that spirit of unthankfulness in us, you know what it's going to cause us to do? It's going to cause us to grieve any spirit of God we've got inside of us. And it's going to cause us to lose all the joy and all the happiness that we have inside of us. And it's going to cause us to grieve God's Spirit to be able to move inside of us. And when we grieve the Spirit of God, you know what? We can miss out on some valuable instruction that He's trying to give us. I don't know about y'all, but I think myself to be a fairly smart guy. So the problem with thinking that you're fairly smart is sometimes you depend on your smarts too much and you make a mistake. So if you just go ahead and realize you're a dummy, then you don't just make a decision so easily. But once you start thinking, I'm a pretty smart guy, then we start making mistakes. And can I say that if we don't have the Spirit of the Lord freely moving inside of us, it's much easier for us to make a mistake. It's much easier for us to say something that we shouldn't really said, do something that we shouldn't really done, because we don't have the Spirit of the Lord speaking to us on the inside saying, hey, hold up, And if we're not careful, we will grieve the Spirit of God, and then He can't speak to us and show us the instruction for what we need. And so Hannah here, God had been mighty good to her. God had given her the portion and the provision, and even poured out the passion in her life and all those different things. But if we're not careful, we will miss what God is doing for us. And I don't know about y'all, but I would say that God has done a lot for me. I mean, He's done a whole lot for me. Now, me personally, me and Jennifer together, we'll be married 18 years coming up in July, which seems very odd because I don't feel like I'm old enough to be married 18 years. But we'll be married 18 years in July. And so over the 18 years, man, we've had great years. I mean, I've got no complaints. But I will say that we have had things happen that we didn't want to happen. And through those things that has happened, we had to make a decision on how we were going to respond. And if there's been a few critical times, if we wouldn't have been real careful, we would have lost all our joy and we would have completely been unthankful to God. Something that me and her don't even really discuss a whole lot with each other is we've had 4 pregnancies, but we've only got 2 kids here. And so if you're not careful, you can let those things rob you of your joy. And so the only way to get through those things is we've got to focus on all the blessings that God has placed in our life and trust that God knows what He's doing. And if we're not careful, man, we can get so focused on that completely distracts us from the blessings that we have at the house. And so our oldest daughter, she'd be 17 now, which is crazy. And so, you know what, for me that's really hard sometimes is when you see somebody that's got a 17-year-old kid and they don't care about them and they don't take care of them. You know what, if I ain't careful, that'll make me bitter. But what I've got to do is I've got to just trust that God knows what He's doing, and I've got to make sure that I'm just thankful for what God's already done anyway. And can I say that I don't deserve anything anyway, so anything that I have gotten is just a bonus. But it's very important that we're thankful for what God's done, because if we really wanted to, we can find plenty of things to complain and be mad at God for not playing out the way we wanted them to play out. But if we just trust God, I promise you it will change what's going on the inside of you. I remember several years ago when the recession was really bad, and I'll close here in just a minute, but the recession, was pretty strong around here. And I had just a beater truck at the time, just something cheap I'd bought, paid cash for it. And so I was working, and I was at 285 and I-20, which is never a good place to even be at. And that truck quit, just going down 285, and all of a sudden it just quits. And so I ease over and put it neutral, and it won't crank. And so you can only assume my initial response. I mean, I was pretty much furious, And so anyway, I messed with it for a few minutes. It will not crank no matter what I do. And so I was almost sweating just from being so mad, And so as I sit there for a minute and just try to figure out what to do, I just started singing, "Thank you, Lord." And, my situation didn't change at all. Like, nothing in my situation changed. When I finished singing the song, the truck still would not crank. But you know what had changed? My attitude and my joy had changed. And so I sat there and I called somebody, had them come, pick me in the truck up. And as I sit there and waited on them, man, all that anger and frustration, it finally just started kind of going out of me. And not because I'd done anything great, but just because I'd realized that, hey, you might as well thank God anyway. I mean, you might as well thank God that you even had the strength to be out here working. Something could have happened to me, and I couldn't even, I could be in the hospital or on the edge of death or something like that. But God had already blessed me in so many other ways that, hey, you might as well just sit here and be thankful for the break, because that's what you're getting the rest of the day. You ain't getting no more work done. And so, and I'm not trying to say that I'm anything at all. I'm just giving you a personal experience of things that's happened in my life. And every time that I've had something bad happen in my life, the more I thank God through those things, it's amazing how much it's changed my spirit. And you might be thinking, well, you just don't know what's going on in my situation. I just can't thank God right now. And I understand that, and, I'm with you. Life is very hard, very difficult sometimes, but I just want to implore you, just turn your heart to God no matter what the situation may be. There may not be anybody here that's upset with God tonight, may not be anybody here that's bitter with God tonight, but can I just make you a promise that whenever something comes into life, if you can just focus on God and His goodness, it will make whatever the situation is not seem so bad. Here's the thing. We can't change most things anyway. And so I'm quick to, if somebody does me wrong, I don't have to even put a lot of energy into it. I can automatically come up with a plan on how to get them back. And it just naturally comes to me. It's a gift that I have that's not of God. And but you know what I've got to do? I've got to be careful that I don't dwell on my plan and how I can fix it, but just plan and just dwell on how good God is. And Miss Leslie, if you want to come to the piano tonight, I just want to ask you tonight, are you thankful for all the blessings that God's given you? Have you said thank you today for all the blessings that God's given you? Sometimes when we're, have issues and things come about, me and Jennifer will be talking about it, and I'll tell her, you know what, I'll take that problem any day over some other problems. Nobody at the house has got cancer. Nobody at the house is on hospice. Whatever problem I'm facing today, you know what, I'll take that one today. Because no matter how bad our day may be, it can get so much worse. And so you might as well be thankful for all the things that God's already done for you and for all the blessings that He's already put in your life. And so, Miss Leslie, you mind just singing one verse? And if everybody will stand, I just want to ask you tonight, will you just thank Him one more time? And this morning when you got up, God was thinking about you and where you're at and your situation and what's going on in your life. And so can you just say thank you one more time to God for doing that? Because He's been mighty, mighty good.